I'm sorry, but I can't help but remain a little bit confused by something that I saw in the mainstream press recently. And that was an event where the Pope had come to Canada and on a kind of an apology tour. He was there to admit that a lot of what happened was evil. He didn't equivocate. He didn't equivocate enough, in fact. But if you're going to apologize, then what you do is you apologize. You don't equivocate right up front. You don't say, oh, well, a lot of benefits were brought at the same time. That's a good point. That's an interesting point. Medical care, for example. But when you're making the apology, you have to make an apology in a spirit in which it can be accepted emotionally. So you have to admit to the wrong. You have to apologize, and you have to do it in public. That should be enough. But it apparently wasn't for this one, I would say, slightly deranged Aboriginal woman who decided to take it upon herself and commandeer the whole event with what certainly an expression of some kind of pain. But you really have to wonder whether or not that was the place for it, given that an apology was being made. And the more, a humble person, a strong and good person would be looking at that with some sort of appreciation for it finally happening. Not her. And she's been universally praised for her outburst. Outburst. If you stutter, the first thing you should do is make fun of yourself. I collect my thoughts. My memory is so bad that I forget what I just said, but what she went on to do was sing a song that was supposedly an Aboriginal song, but sung to the tune of O Canada. So how'd that happen? I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence. And then she went on a big diatribe about how Europeans had taken over much of the world with this idea. You have to, if you're going to encourage people to go out and take over people's land and murder them and all that stuff, it doesn't hurt at all to give them a religious justification for doing so. It's convenient. So it's convenient. It was convenient for them to think that they had a kind of a God-given right to go out and seize territory. That's what we're talking about. But what she followed her song with was something very similar. Yeah, so given that there's a real issue there, isn't there? With a woman like that, assuming or feeling one would expect, Europeans don't really have any right being here at all. Not even if their families go back a couple 100, 300 years. Because they were not the people that the Great Spirit decided to bequeath the land to. That's pretty vile, hateful stuff. And that's what a lot feel. A lot of that. I'm talking about the kind of extreme activists. And in fact, that sentiment, that basic sense that Europeans don't even have the right to be here at all, is being used to earn a lot of money for certain Aboriginal people. Like there's one development in Falls Creek. They're building a really big condo. Nice design. I don't have any issue with them developing anything there anyway, but at some point they have to quit complaining. According to their own calculations, they stand to make something around like $1 billion in profit off of that building. $1 billion. And it's all leasehold. So what that means is that, no, Whitey, you'll never own it. There were people that were living on leasehold land property, I think it was in South Vancouver, and they weren't paying enough. But the Aboriginal band jacked the price up just to the point where, there's just no way the majority of people could continue to live there. They might have lived there, for a generation or something. They had to leave. They just couldn't afford it. It's fitting, perhaps, to be having this discussion at the mouth of Indian Arm. A body of water that I'd like to explore someday. Sorry, that didn't work over well, did it? That's better. Let me try this. I push that little thing that says AF log. Okay, let's try something else. Let's do that boat. Put it right on that boat. Nothing. Yeah, so another curious thing about that whole episode is that all the nimblewits in the mainstream media are drooling over themselves and over her, and what a profound, heartfelt expression of what? Pain? Hatred? Kinda. Like, you wonder, Aboriginal people had been, and Catholics, I'm going to go ahead and guess that woman is not a Catholic, but Catholics in particular had really wanted an apology from the Pope. And there are a lot of Catholic Catholic Aboriginals in Canada. So, in the name of equal time, you would think that they might have at some point interviewed some of those people to discover whether or not they had a different opinion. And it'd be interesting too to discover whether or not they felt safe to express that opinion in Canada. Aboriginal people who come out and said, no, that was a profoundly disrespectful thing that you did there. What sort of difficulties would that create for those people? You have to wonder. In my opinion, that woman is narcissistic in the extreme. She thought it was up to her to take charge of that whole situation and lay it out for everybody how we were to understand it. She's narcissistic and she's histrionic. She likes that kind of outburst. I don't I don't question that it was a heartfelt outburst, and that you'd be a bit empty of soul not to understand that there's a lot of pain there. Where did that pain come from? She's obviously in a lot of pain. My guess is that she's had pretty serious substance abuse disorders. My guess is that she has been traumatized. And if she has been traumatized, quite likely at the hands of other Aboriginal people. And she's also traumatized, like a lot of Aboriginal people, by this idea that they have been so uniquely abused. I mean, something that that never happens is that, okay, in reality, Aboriginal people have done more damage to their own children than the residential schools ever did. And they would argue that's because of, the honest ones, the good ones. They'll say, yeah, we know that. I remember reading about a town at one time that there was an entire Aboriginal village or whatever it was, and there was nobody that wasn't engaged in incest. Nobody. Every single adult and every single child was involved. And so they'll argue that they're messed up that way because of what happened to them in the residential schools. What they don't point out is that they were abused quite often by young females. And it never, occurred to them probably that those women had probably been abused themselves. Right? And so the buck stops with Whitey, doesn't it? Nobody would even dream of following that back and asking, well, if the Catholic Church was abusing children, it's likely that those nuns were also abused, and that's why they abused the kids in residential schools in Canada. And those children grew up to abuse their children. This would not occur to them. In my opinion, that woman was extremely rude. She has obvious psychiatric issues. Narcissistic, grandiose, histrionic. And who was it that authorized her to put on that performance? I don't know. Sorry about this weird edit. I don't know what happened there. That's not an edit, but sorry about that. God, this is hard work.